India has strongly rejected the $300 billion climate finance package for the Global South, calling it insufficient and unfair. This is at the UN Climate Conference. India has accused the COP29 presidency and the UN Climate Change Office of pushing through the deal without allowing the country to voice its objections. In fact, Chandni Raina, the advisor to India's Department of Economic Affairs, described the adoption process as stage-managed and said it highlighted the growing lack of trust in the UN system. The new package, which replaces the $100 billion pledge from 2009, is set to be delivered annually by 2035, but India insists it is too little to address the needs of developing nations. Listen in.
The goal is too little, too distant. It is 2035, it's too far gone. Our 2030 estimates tell us that we need to do it at 1.3 trillion per year till 2030. But we have only been agreeable to have, or we have a proposal that talks about 300 USD billion mobilization goal. It does not address the needs and priorities of developing countries. The amount that is proposed to be mobilized is abysmally poor. It's a paltry sum. It is not something that will enable conducive climate action that is necessary for the survival of our country and for the growth of our people, their livelihoods. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot accept it.
And joining us for further clarity on the broadcast, Abinash Mohanty, Global Sector Head from IPE Global. Thanks so much, Abinash, for making time for us. Now, supporters of the deal argue that it represents progress, while critics like India and Nigeria have dismissed that. Is this climate finance deal truly effective in addressing the urgent needs of the Global South? Or would you argue that it is just symbolic action to pacify international concerns?
Good morning. First of all, we have taken 29 editions of Conference of Parties to reach into some sort of consensus into the need of what vulnerable countries actually need in terms of mitigating the impacts of climate change. And in the Conference of Parties, the demand has already been agreed. It's not a number that we have given. Our requirement as a developing country, as a group of developing countries, 1.3 trillion. But what has happened of late is all of these symbolical tokens, COP after COP, which has been done, of 300 billion. At first, this was $250 billion when the walkout was staged and the developing countries kind of protested. It was made after European Union's intervention to $300 billion. And that $300 billion is actually too little, too slow. It is not even what is the exact quantum. And what India did was kind of voicing out the voice of the Global South in terms of taking it forward and providing that voice for the most vulnerable ones, that these amounts are just mere symbolical and emblematic. And these amounts are not going to help us in some way or the other. And that's what is the larger problem with the COP processes now, that the bridge is already been burnt. It's been burning more and more rather than just the trust bridge that should be breached in between the developing country. And that's where the problem lies.
In fact, Abinash, India has expressed discontent with the fact that it was not allowed to speak also before the deal's adoption. In this case, how much influence do developing countries have in these high-level climate negotiations? Would you say the process needs more inclusivity and more transparency?
So the process, as per the process, there is a draft text that comes out, and after the draft text, all the countries, at least selected few countries, have got a chance to speak up. Whereas in this case, India wasn't allowed because it was well clear that countries like India are going to protest it, countries like India are going to put it forward, not agree to it. And the UN processes need to be more transparent. You can't be just stage mannering these conferences, because this is a question where lives, livelihood, economies and infrastructures are at stake for larger part of the globe. countries and the larger part of the globe. And more importantly, what has happened is the Western or the developed countries have eaten up the carbon sink to the larger extent. Now, after eating up, they have been pushing developing countries like India, Brazil, to go ahead, Cuba, to go ahead in terms of adopting low carbon pathways at a faster rate.
Right.
Whereas we have also got developing kind of agendas and parameters, and we need our time. It's not that we are not doing our climate actions. At home, we are one of the global leaders, and we have been pushing our limits in terms of balancing out between climate agenda as well as climate targets, as well as our developmental targets. And now, once these targets have been made, what has happened is the technology which is required by countries like India, they are also not made available, accessible, and affordable. And that's where the real question comes in. And these are all some of the major questions which the COP or the human processes need to answer. It can't just be stage mannered every time one COP after the other. And that's where the real challenge comes into picture.
Indeed. Abinash, thanks so much for joining us and for the great insight. We sincerely hope that climate negotiations can make some tangible movement on the ground rather than them being just symbolic concerns. Thanks so much, Abinash Mohanty, for joining us.